We sent him to the Capitol in 1965. First, he was our congressman, then our speaker. He was even our ambassador. On July 24th, Eastern Washington will say thanks. Come and share in an hour of laughter and reflection on the remarkable life of Tom Foley. The event is free at the Bing Crosby Theater Wednesday, July 24th at 5:30. Together, we'll say thanks, Tom.
Welcome to a live broadcast from the Bing Crosby Theater in downtown Spokane, a living tribute to Tom Foley. The gentleman from Washington served in the United States House of Representatives for 30 years. He retired as Speaker of the House in 1995. And tonight his friends gathered to say, thanks, Tom. Here are your hosts, Tom MacArthur and Kent Adams.
Good evening and welcome to a live broadcast from the Bing Crosby Theater in downtown Spokane. Tom MacArthur at the microphone with you. Kent Adams, my business partner, is on the other end of another microphone in the lobby of the Bing Crosby Theater. We'll be joining him shortly. But first, let me explain to you what we're doing here tonight. Tonight is a special occasion here at the Bing Crosby Theater, as most occasions are at this grand silent movie palace from 1915. But tonight is a special occasion for us to honor Tom Foley. Thomas S. Foley, Speaker of the House, former Speaker of the House, former representative in Congress, former ambassador to Japan, a gentleman who we know is listening to us live now on a radio line back to Washington, D.C. His mind is clear, his health is failing, and we want to take this opportunity to come together as a community here in Eastern Washington and in Spokane and say two simple words to the man from Washington, the gentleman from Washington who served us in D.C. for 30 years. And the theme of the evening is simply, thanks, Tom. So that's our cause this evening, to look back at the life and times of Tom Foley in Congress. Our program here is brought to you today by Avista and Maloney and O'Neill. We thank them both for their investment in our community conversation here tonight to honor our former gentleman from Washington. This program will last until the bottom of the hour, until 5:30, and then we'll be taking you live to the stage of the Bing Crosby Theater at 5:30, and that's when we'll have an hour-long conversation with members of the community. The mayor is here to speak, former colleagues of Mr. Foley from both his time here in Washington and in the other Washington. So we'll have a chance to reflect on some of the fingerprints that he's left here in Eastern Washington and our 5th Congressional District, both in Congress and in his other careers that he's held in public service. So once again, Tom MacArthur and Kent Adams with you. I'm going to toss it over to my colleague now, Kent Adams, who's standing by in the lobby of the Bing Crosby Theater, and he has a special guest with him, Mr. Randy Shaw, who's going to be our Master of Ceremonies this evening. Gentlemen, I'll let you have a conversation and take it away.
Yeah. We're out in the lobby, as you might gather from the voices in the background, a full lobby, or I guess technically it's not the lobby, it's the foyer of the Bing Crosby Theater. And we have a fella here that I think most of you know. You'll know by his voice. And I guess it's so much better tonight because it's just his voice, not his video. I'm giving a bad time to our MC tonight, Randy Shaw. Randy, when Rich and I called, why did you say yes to be our MC tonight?
Well, because, I covered Tom Foley. I covered Congress 40 years ago. So I go back a long way with Mr. Foley. And he's one of those people that really has commanded the respect of both sides of the political aisle. And he was just a wonderful statesman. And I'm honored to be here for this.
Yeah, you did say yes right away, which we really appreciate. And I think we're going to have some fun tonight. There are going to be some light moments. Folks that are coming in are now videotaping messages to Tom. And as you know, Randy, Tom's not in the greatest health. His mind is really sharp, but it's, as you start to age and so forth, and Tom really has contributed to our community. Do you have a favorite little Tom Foley story?
Well, in fact, one of the one of the photographers at Krem just told me one, coming down there. He said, hey, you're not going to believe this, but one time he came in, and of course he was Speaker of the House. He had this huge entourage, and he sat, Tom.
Kind of like being a local anchor.
Yeah, oh, yeah, like that, yeah. Me with a face for radio. Okay, and so he sat down, and so the photographer is very nervous. It's the first time he'd met the speaker, and so he's putting the microphone on the speaker and rips this very expensive silk tie that the speaker had on. It just ripped it to shreds. Mr. Foley didn't say anything. He tucked in all of the little threads and everything on for the TV interview, never said a thing, and he said, you know, what a class act that was to not ever even say a word, and he's never forgotten that moment.
You know, it's he's the epitome of being a statesman. And we don't really have, and I don't care what party you're from, we really don't have many of those anymore. It's one side or the other, and no compromising, no working things out. And we had Scoop Jackson and others from, I'm going back to the good old days, and that was different then than it is now. Do you wish we had more Tom Foleys?
Oh, absolutely. And I think America wishes we had more Tom Foleys. The art of compromise, the art of sitting down across the table with your political opponent and finding some common ground was his greatest talent. And he was just a master at that, just a master.
So we're going to let you go here because you got to get ready for tonight. Try to memorize a line or two. We'll get your teleprompter going. No, thank you, Randy, for being part of all this tonight. We really appreciate your stepping up and being part of the salute to Tom.
Oh, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm honored to be here. Honored.
Great. Randy Shaw from Krem TV. You won't see him on the 5 and 6 o'clock news tonight because he's here emceeing at the Bing Crosby Theater. And if it sounds a little loud, it's because there are a lot of people here. And I think the community is really coming out, Tom MacArthur, to celebrate the good times in Spokane and a Speaker of the House, a 30-year veteran, if you will, of Congress and all that went with that, as well as serving as ambassador for the United States to Japan.
Well, it's to set the stage for our radio audience here. We're in the lobby of the Bing Crosby Theater, and it's full house. We've got a lot of folks finding their seats in the theater, getting ready for the 5:30 presentation to begin. And what struck me is that it's a reunion of sorts of folks who have known Mr. Foley over the years and helped on a number of his campaigns and just knew him as a friend or a neighbor. And when that catalyst of that community, didn't have the chance to come back as often anymore, friendships found other ways to keep in touch, and now they're back together again with the original catalyst in place, Mr. Foley. It's interesting to see all of the folks that have been part of the conversation, leading Eastern Washington through our representative in Congress over the past 30 years, and to see that there is, in fact, a spark here in the community that still recognizes the name, that still knows what we're doing here tonight, and appreciates the work of Mr. Foley back in Washington, D.C. You've read certain accounts in the press that there were two local executives who put this program together today. Kent Adams is my business partner. He's been on the air with me before today. And the other person who's been a real key in putting all of this together is Mr. Rich Cowan with North by Northwest. Rich joins me now at the microphone in the lobby of the Bing Crosby Theater. Rich, what was your vision for all of this months ago when the thought was, let's do something for Tom?
Well, he served us for 30 years as a member of Congress, the last 5 years as Speaker of the House. And he was a guy who just served everyone. Didn't matter what party you were with. He really did what he could for everyone in our district, our state, and our country. And it's time to honor that. It's time to honor that sort of bipartisan approach to government.
If you look at the cover of the current Nostalgia magazine, there's a picture of Tom Foley back from his Gonzaga days, and it's Legacy of a Statesman. I think that's a fitting title for this man.
It absolutely is, a true statesman, somebody who looked at an issue, looked at all sides, and then would come to a conclusion based on data and what really works for people, not just based on some preset ideology.
Now, you've had your hand in politics locally for a while and had a chance to see what that feels like. Can you imagine doing this for 30 years,
oh my gosh,
flying back and forth every other week?
That would be exhausting. It really would be, all that work. And that's a tribute to the strength that he had, just the physical strength that he had to be able to do that. I mean, I did this thing for a year, 30 years of this, of basically sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night in that intensity all the time. I mean, it's really something.
I know you've been back to Washington, D.C. on a number of occasions, as have I. I had the opportunity, which is something that I still cherish, to watch the sun set over this great country from the speaker's balcony of the Capitol.
Oh my gosh.
And I can imagine that Tom enjoyed that view night after night, thinking of his folks 3,000 miles away. He never really lost touch with us.
Oh,
it
he
was
never did.
something that this was part of his life.
That was so important to him, to always represent the people of this district. That's your major job as a member of Congress, to represent your district. He never lost sight of that. He always fought hard for people here. Didn't matter how big or large the problem was or whatever, Tom was there for you.
What can we learn from his legacy? How can we move forward as a region, as a congressional district, as a people from his leadership?
Well, that's a great question. It's about working together to solve our problems, not in two different sections or ideologies, but working together as a group. We're 99% the same anyway.
Yeah.
You know, let's cherish that, let's honor that, and let's work together.
Who are some of the people speaking here tonight? This is a who's who of regional political leadership.
A lot of great people here. You know, we have people flying over from Seattle. We have people here in Spokane. We have letters from Presidents Clinton and Bush. Randy Shaw is our MC. It's just going to be a great time tonight.
Well, we're looking forward to it. In about, what is it now, about 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Bottom of the hour, we'll start the presentation. Rich, congratulations on the good event.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Mr. Adams?
Mr. MacArthur, we have a couple of folks, you know, there's national politics and all that goes on, but there's also local politics. And I think someone said everything's local. We have two candidates running for the 3rd District, Seat 2. You would think I would know this by now. And it's Candace Mumm and Kelly Cruz. And other than to be here to be seen, of course, we know that. But let's move beyond politics. And Candace, I'm going to go to you first because you're much better looking to start with. But yeah, he'll agree. Tell me, why are you here? Why does this matter to celebrate Tom Foley's life?
Well, my first career was in journalism, and we would cover Tom Foley when I was the managing editor at Channel 4. And, you know, to have someone who was of such great stature and was doing so much for the community and so connected to Washington, D.C., the two Washingtons, you know, I remember all the coverage that we did and going back and sending reporters to meet with him and go around the community. And then last year I had the opportunity to get to know Heather a little better because she was helping support the Rich Cowan campaign. And we would talk and she would support things. And, you know, I think every great politician usually has a support system. And I know Heather was a support system. We always talk about Tom Foley, but Heather was a very
She was always there.
She was a very big part. And I want to say that, a little shout out to Heather, because I'm one of the few women running, and we're hearing a lot about women leaning into politics. And I don't think Heather had the opportunity to do that because of the generation that she was involved in. So I just want to say Heather was a big part of Tom's success.
Yes, but she did her part for her country by organizing the office and supporting all that went on. And that's really important. You know, you don't always have to be the candidate, but to be a part of it, I think, is the important message that you have as well. And Kelly, you're running against Candace. There are 4 of you in the race, right?
There is. I kind of say running with, though. Kelly and I have known each other for a long time.
We're a group of 4, so... Well, I've had the chance a couple times to interview you, Kelly. And why are you here? I know you're here to be seen. Of course, I'm, saying that jokingly, but as well as practically. But why? What's the legacy that you see of Tom Foley?
Well, like I've told you in a previous radio show, that Tom was really our last national figure who was a true statesman, and I think that our current people in House and the government could take a lesson from him. I'm reminded of the old adage that a house divided cannot stand and a house united will not fall. Tom was along that line. He understood how to make both sides come to the table and talk about the issues. And he gave up as well as getting some over his years in politics, and that's something we all have to realize, that other people have opinions and views, and we've got to respect that. That's why we have free speech in this country. But at the end of the day, we've all got to come together and agree what's best for ourselves as a whole, as a nation. So,
and we are a United States, and that comes down to the city council position as well, of how can we get along, how can we prioritize, because I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, there's always prioritizing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so especially with economic issues and social issues, the city's become so diverse in the last 40 years, especially as it's grown. So we have to recognize that and acknowledge that and work with the folks from all different backgrounds and economic lifestyles.
Well, I wish both of you luck because I admire folks who will sit down, write the check, give up the time, give up the privacy that goes with it, and so forth to serve, whether it's a Tom Foley as Speaker of the House and Congressman, or whether it's local politics and helping continue to make Spokane the great place that I know all three of us agree on. So thank you, Candace. Thank you, Kelly, for being here.
You bet. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kent.
And we have another guest here that a former mayor, and gosh, I haven't seen you forever. Sherry Barnard, in case you don't know the voice behind it. Tom, I'm going to let you take this interview.
Sure.
Great to see you.
Sherry, our paths have crossed many times over the years, and here they cross again over a mutual friend in Tom Foley. What do you think of this evening, the reason to put it together, and the fact that we now have a chance to say thanks?
Oh, I think it's a wonderful idea. And met Tom, worked for him for all his campaigns, and I was just trying to think the first time he was elected. Can you tell me?
1964.
Oh, my gosh. Well, when I did get involved and I ran for council in 1984, and I won after losing several times, we went back to Washington, D.C., my husband and I, and we were escorted into Speaker of the House Foley's lovely quarters when he was just back there. He was so happy to see us, and it was such an honor to be back there with him. And then Heather took us to lunch in the main dining room. So I think it's great that we can all come and celebrate, and I wish him well, he and Heather both.
Well, and truly, Heather was his de facto chief of staff for most of those years. I don't know that they could have run the office if they hadn't had each other.
Right, so I wish her the best, too. And I must say, I loved Tom Foley's parents. What a wonderful pair. And I also knew Heather's family parents quite well, too. So they have a great history.
Sometimes we forget about that generation because obviously they're gone now. For those of us who never had the chance to meet them, what were Tom's parents like?
Well, Ralph, I believe it was Ralph and Helen Foley, and they lived on Rockwood Boulevard. And I just remember them as they were older as just being very special and very wonderful. And I would say one person I wish was here tonight that I just found out she couldn't make it, Janet Gilpatrick. She's not well. She loved Tom. She worked so hard for him. And so on behalf of all of us here, I just want to wish her well, too.
Sherry Barnard, former mayor of the city of Spokane, thank you. I'll let you find your seat in the theater.
I want to ask a question, Sherry. It's been, 15 years probably since I've seen 20? How come you have not aged? That's the question. That's the question, because as you look at me, I have, but why haven't you?
I think it's my filled out cheeks. Not Botox.
It's the real thing, right?
And he encouraged me, and it's really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
She's taking a picture.
We're having our picture taken.
Yeah.
Of course, you at home have no idea because this is radio. So, but you can see this on the internet or something. No, we have. Thank you, Sherry. We're standing in the foyer of the Bing Theater here, and I changed shirts between our broadcast at 12:30 and now to look fresh, and it is so warm, I think partially because of the door, but mainly because of the number of people here today.
Yeah, it's encouraging to see. We've both been back in Washington, D.C., especially this time of the year. I had a member of Congress comment to me once while we were crossing the street to the Capitol, it's been a 3-shirt day. And I didn't know what that meant. And he says, well, I've only had to change shirts 3 times. It's been a good day.
Oh, gee.
That's what you do when it's summertime.
And you were press secretary for George Nethercutt, who won the election against the Speaker of the House in 1994 and started serving in 1995. You were in D.C. for a while. How long were you there?
I was there with George for 1 term. And it was an interesting, as I look back and reflect on my own history with Mr. Foley, I was a reporter at one of the local TV stations at the time that Mr. Nethercutt ran as an opponent, and I remember that was in 1994. it was the expectation that it was going to be an early evening, that this was going to fall Mr. Foley's way, and there was going to be no conversation after that, that he would continue as not only our representative in Congress, but as Speaker of the House. And then things started to look differently after the polls closed at 8 o'clock, and it just looked more and more favorable to Mr. Nethercutt. So I remember going home at 6 o'clock that next morning, after having filed reports to various regional media outlets and back to the network, because they couldn't believe that we had unseated a Speaker of the House the second time in our nation's history. The last time was back in the American Civil War. So every couple hundred years we tend to do something like that, and we did it in 19.
For both of those, right?
I was here for both of those occasions. Yeah, not quite. But that I had the privilege of working with Mr. Nethercutt for one term back in Washington, D.C. We wrote a history book together, In Tune with America, Our History in Song, and he used that as an adjunct professor at Harvard, so I can say that I was co-author on a book that was used as a textbook at Harvard. It's funny how things flow in life.
Is that a good thing?
It's a good thing, I would expect, yes. I see we're joined by a mutual friend of ours here, Garen Hertel. He is the editor, publisher, one of the main reasons why we have a nostalgia magazine here in Spokane, and we mentioned that a moment ago, that Tom Foley is on the cover of that magazine. Garen, you wrote a few words in your editor's preamble to the magazine in this edition, and we have a picture of Mr. Foley on the cover. What was it like for you putting that issue together for your nostalgia readership?
Well, my parents were both huge fans of Tom Foley, so it was a great honor, really, to be able to pay an honor to him, to treat him with that kind of respect, knowing that my parents would be very approving of that. So, yeah.
What do you think of the turnout here tonight? It's a full theater. We still have people trying to find their seats. Here's a fellow who's been gone from the community for a few years, and he still draws a crowd.
There's a big crowd here. Yeah, folks are starting to sit down, and I think it's just really touching to see that people still love and care about someone who's been out of the public eye for a little while, but they remember. They haven't forgotten the things that he's done for our area. Fairchild, the Centennial Trail, various other, the Foley Library on campus at Gonzaga. Our federal courthouse building is named for him. There's just a lot of signs around town that Tom Foley had a big impact on our region and on our people.
What I appreciated working at the Davenport Hotel for a few years was that, history is not what was, it's what is, and legacy is not was, it's what is, and I think we're looking at that tonight. The legacy of Tom Foley is. What he did here is, and those things are for a new generation to appreciate.
That's absolutely true. That's why I love doing the magazine that keeps those memories and those values alive, and you can't forget if it's something that you live every day.
Appreciate your magazine and appreciate your comments here tonight. I'll let you get inside to the theater. Garen, thank you very much. Garen Hertel, editor, publisher of Nostalgia Magazine.
Thanks, Tom.
You betcha. I'll turn it back over to Kent.
Thank you, Tom. We have one of the Stuckards here. Now, this is a generational thing because, Ben, I know your dad from way back when we created Project Share and a number of other things when I was at a company that is now Avista, but was Water Power in my old days. You're president of the city council, and you and the mayor are going to do something tonight and say a few words. But what's it like? I know you're a longtime Democrat and all of that, but how did Tom Foley fit into your life?
Oh, I just remember the evening in 1994 was probably one of the most depressing evenings that I've ever had.
Ben, I thought it was great.
Being down at the Rid Path that night was, it was quite shocking, and I think it changed my life in wanting to get involved in politics. And I remember my parents hosted an event for Tom that election year, and the Today Show was there, and it was pretty amazing what he did for the community. And he got elected in 1964, and I still, one of my mentors is Jack Garrity, who got elected to the county commission in 1964. And so Jack always talks about the young leaders in 64 coming into power.
So you listened?
Yes, and I listened.
That's great. That's great. And how's the city doing?
City's doing great. We're, we got, the mayor and I are both, I'm 41, the mayor's 39, and trying to bring that new leadership into the town.
That's great. Thank you very much for coming tonight and being part of this tribute to Tom. We now have Okay, I'm not going to remember it right.
H.T. Higgins.
Okay, H.T., what's your claim to fame now? Fill in the blanks.
I really don't have any claim to fame. My father was Hank, and Hank Higgins was the infamous guy that drove Tom to Olympia when he first ran Tom's first time.
You're part of that story of his registry?
I'm not about part of the story, but my father was a big part of that story, and Tom spent a lot of time at our house in the early years talking politics and smoking cigarettes and talking politics with my dad, and so yeah, I have great memories of Tom at my house.
And you're part of the family, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm the Higgins side of the family. I would be the Tom's mother, who was a Higgins, and then my dad was his first cousin, and
and do you know this Colin Mulvaney guy? Do you know him?
Yeah, I know Colin well.
Is he a pretty good guy?
Colin's a good man.
Have you been over to his house?
No, I haven't been to his house, but
Well, why not?
Well, he did a really nice deal for his dad. His dad just passed away.
Yes.
Did some really nice celebration of his dad's life. So yeah.
Well, I only tease you about it because we share a driveway. Colin and I. Yeah. So it actually started out years ago with Dan Kleckner, and we've kept it in the Coles family with Colin.
Oh, really?
And so you're related to him?
I'm related to Colin. Yeah, we'd be
my deepest sympathies to you, and it's good that you're part of the Tom Foley family. And isn't this exciting? I mean, can you feel the excitement tonight?
Yeah, definitely, and just the history of it.
Yes.
Seeing the old political yard signs and all those things that have lots of memory.
And describe the buttons we all have.
Well, they're very nice. Thanks, Tom. They look like a campaign button.
Exactly. All right, there's some hope for Rich Cowan and myself then.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for being a part of this. All right, great. We're going to begin to wind down a little bit out here in the foyer as we scatter folks into the auditorium to get ready for the program that begins in just a few minutes. So I'm going to turn this back, the microphone back to Tom MacArthur. Tom, it's yours.
Thank you, Kent. Appreciate your interviews there in the lobby of the Bing Crosby Theater. Kent's going to rejoin me here at our table inside the theater. We're listening to some piano music in the background as we await 5:30 and the program to begin. Mr. Gabe Jensen is our pianist, and he's entertaining the audience as we're prepared for the 5:30 program, getting together to have an opportunity to say thanks to former Congressman Tom Foley. If we look back at his resume, we can see he held a number of political offices and appointments. Certainly he was the member from Washington's 5th Congressional District from 1965 to 1995. He was in that capacity chairman of the House Agriculture Committee in 1975 to 1981, House Majority Whip from 81 to 87, House Majority Leader from 87 to 89, Speaker of the House, as we've mentioned, from 89 to 95, and then after that career, he started another one as U.S. Ambassador to Japan from 1997 to 2001. So just reading this kind of tuckers you out to think that this gentleman not only kept up an office in Washington, D.C., but another one in Spokane, and then after a while had another one in Japan, and would keep all of those frequent flyer miles. And I can't imagine that he and Heather wanted to go flying anywhere after all of that. But it was an incredible life. As the movie title says, it's a one of those things that doesn't happen very often. And this occasion here, I can't imagine it happening anywhere in my lifetime yet, as we thank a long-term member of Congress for his service back in Washington, D.C. Kent, you're rejoining me here at the microphone. We have 2 minutes to go before we take our microphones up on the stage and join the program.
Yes.
What strikes you as this crowd gathers tonight?
Well, I'm number one, have been out in the foyer, interviewing with you and so forth, and I walked in here. This downstairs at the Bing Theater is virtually filled. And that's exciting because, we put this out a few weeks ago and invited people. There were no tickets. There's no cost. And, sometimes that's a reason not to show up on a hot 93, 95 degree day. But I am absolutely enthused by the enthusiasm of all of our guests. And many of them have stopped to do a greeting to Tom and Heather on the video cameras that we have in the lobby. and some great stories I'm hearing, and things are looking really good. And I'm pleased that we have that kind of attendance. We could have had maybe 3 people, and you just don't know. So Tom and Heather, as you listen to this, know that this community really supports you and misses you, and you're going to hear some fun things tonight from the variety of speakers we have. I think we need to thank several people who have helped make this happen. Tom Reed, the owner of KTW, is here working the board. Might point out also that we have Vista and Maloney and O'Neill Insurance, if I can say it right, that have stepped up to help underwrite the cost of broadcasting this live to folks in the Spokane area, as well as literally wherever you have a smartphone these days. You can listen to this broadcast, and you can also listen to that little program we do on Wednesdays at 12:30 called Business Talks. And so soon we're going to be joining the podium with Randy Shaw, who is our MC, and begin our program.
Randy's making his way to the front of the hall, and we'll be hearing from him momentarily. As the show begins, I'll encourage you to listen quite closely to the opening that's pre-taped. In that, you'll hear a quote from John Kennedy's inaugural address from 1961. And in there, he speaks about calling a new generation to service. And Tom Foley answered that call, in fact, used that quote in his campaign ad in 1964. And I found that in the Spokane Chronicle as I was doing my research online. And here's about a 3rd-page ad with Mr. Foley's picture doing various things, and a quote from John Kennedy, then the recently deceased President of the United States. And he took inspiration from that to begin the next generation of leadership for our country. And here we are now, almost a half century after that, looking back to see what impact he had from that inspiration, and it fills a theater in Spokane.
Yeah, and Tom, we could use you these days in D.C. representing us with the political divide and all that goes on. The statesman, the approach, you always took the high road. I think many times I interviewed you, I always thought that you were very mindful of the fact that I was a young kid in his early 30s interviewing, and I always felt when I walked away from the interview that I was somebody special. And the more I thought about that, is that's how you treated everybody, whether it was an interview or whether it was a community event or whatever. You took the time, you took people on tours of the Capitol and so forth. And today, everyone has their group of groupies and handlers, and Tom Foley was one who took the action himself and really helped lead a lot of the decisions that helped move us forward in that era.
I remember, Kent, that when Mr. Foley was elected Speaker of the House, I wrote him a letter to say congratulations. I thought that was something he'd appreciate hearing from a constituent in his district. No doubt that he got a number of those letters from folks saying congratulations. But I saved the letter that came back. I assume it was in his own hand that he wrote his signature and said thanks for the good wishes, and I hope that I can live up to your expectations. And then he signed it with a very simple signature line. He said, "With every good wish." And I've always remembered that, and perhaps, Tom, tonight, what you'll feel from this theater is every good wish from the people who remember you, who know you, who respected you for your 30 years in Congress. And here we are with the opportunity to say thanks in person. So we hope you'll enjoy the show, both Tom and Heather, and for the folks that are here in the theater as well.
Well, they're giving the 3-minute warning, as you've probably heard part of it, because our engineer wasn't on top of things like he should have been. I'm just giving him a bad time. He's the owner of the station, so there goes our show. Well, we've had the pleasure for the last hour to listen to some piano music by Gabe Jensen, who happens to be the son of Matt over at the Davenport Hotel. So if you wish, it's kind of the neighbor across the street sending over his kid at 19 to play for us, and he did a great job, and we really appreciate Gabe doing that. You're going to hear tonight from some local people and you're going to hear from some national people. And I think that really kind of helps tell the story of Tom Foley, that folks here loved him, and folks nationally. And then obviously with his service as ambassador to Japan, the world enjoyed his leadership and how he put people at ease, which I think we could use some more of that these days. Mm-hmm. And Heather was always there, always as a volunteer in his office, running things, making sure things happen correctly and so forth. And Heather, we appreciate all that you have meant to the Spokane area and in Tom's life. We really appreciate that. And
I'm sure she was the longest-serving unpaid chief of staff in the history of the Capitol.
Yeah. You know, we talk about women in politics, but that's also what she did. She really helped serve her country in this district by helping Tom all those years. And Heather, we really do appreciate that. We're just kind of watching for the cue. Here we go. We'll take the mics at the podium.
The word go forth from this time and place to friend and foe alike that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans born in this century, tempered by war.
President Kennedy calls to a new generation. Tom Foley answers and becomes our congressman in 1965. He serves as our representative for 30 years and retires as Speaker of the House in 1995. Tonight, from the Bing Crosby Theater in downtown Spokane, we say thanks, Tom. Now, please welcome your Master of Ceremonies and my friend, Randy Shaw.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming down here tonight and taking the time to pay tribute and celebrate the life and career of Tom Foley. Now, due to Tom's rather frail health, he can't be with us tonight to enjoy and reflect on some of the many comments and the highlights that you're about to hear over the next hour. But we are taping this entire event for Tom and Heather to enjoy at home. And we're also broadcasting live right now over Radio 630 for those who can't be here in person. So if you want to text someone and say you can hear it on the radio at 630, you can do that right now. We want you to sit back, relax. We want to have some fun here tonight. We've got a few laughs. We want to reflect on the impact that this one person has had on so many in Washington and the other Washington, and of course around the world. Unlike a lot of politicians, Tom Foley was always accessible to the news media and reporters like me. He would come back from the 5th Congressional District. It was a tradition. Everybody knew it would happen. He'd always come to town. He would make the rounds at all the TV and radio stations, and he would make time for each and every one so that reporters could ask any question they wanted to ask, and he made everyone feel comfortable and everyone feel at ease. He was always such a gentleman and a true statesman, and often pretty funny. He had an uncanny knack for getting people together to solve problems by finding their common ground, not their differences. And for many, his congressional career is in stark contrast to what a lot of us see today up on Capitol Hill. I heard one comedian try to sum it up last week. Jay Leno said, "A new study published by the British Medical Journal found that inactivity can kill you." And I mean, these are the kind of findings that scare the hell out of Congress. This current Congress, by the way, made broadcast history. They were live on Facebook recently for the first time in history. So now at home, you can waste time and not get your work done by actually watching Congress waste time and not get their work done. When Tom Foley was running things on Capitol Hill, it was a little different. Things got done. He was and still is respected on both sides of the political aisle. He and his Congress had a much higher approval rating than they do today. New Gallup poll shows only 1 in 10 Americans approve the job Congress is doing right now, a 10% approval rating. There's only one job approval rating lower than that: reporters. which means we have about the same approval rating as rabies. But there you go. We want to show you right now a brief video history of Tom from his birth to his election as House Majority Whip. And this is a video produced by KHQ back in 1989. And it is narrated by another man whom I greatly respect. And he is sitting in the far back of the room back there. I noticed him earlier. He's here in attendance. Longtime news anchorman and broadcaster Bob Briley. Would you give him a round of applause there? And now let's take a look at the video.
Tom Foley was born in Spokane on March 6, 1929, the son of Ralph and Helen Foley.
Well, I grew up in a political family, I guess, in a sense. My father was a deputy prosecutor when I was born, and when my sister was born on election day in 1934, it coincided with his election as a prosecuting attorney. He was a judge for 35 years. He died in 1985. I can remember as my very young boy, I mean, I must have been 4 years old, having to defend my Democratic credentials against my friends in the neighborhood who were all the sons and daughters of Republicans. I was always thrilled growing up with the idea of righting wrongs, the idea that the public commitment was to do justice, to justify the confidence of the public. The thought also that the government, while it could be an oppressor, and it could be a source of evil and misfortune for people, also could be a positive instrument for good.
Young Tom attended Gonzaga Prep, where he excelled scholastically and joined the debate team.
Tom was a very, very good debater. He was winning all of the tournaments, and I think that's probably where he's gained many of his skills. He could take both the affirmative and then the negative on each issue.
Tom spent 2 years at Gonzaga University and then transferred to the University of Washington, where he graduated.
When Tom was at law school, I know that he would frequently be asked by friends to intervene and work out compromises on various personal problems that arose. He was good at it.
After graduating from law school in 1957, Tom Foley set up a law practice with his cousin Henry Higgins. The following year, he went into the Spokane County Prosecutor's Office. In 1961, after a brief stint as an Assistant State Attorney General, Tom went to Washington, D.C. to serve on the Senate Interior Committee as a special counsel to the late Senator Henry Jackson. 3 years later, with Jackson's encouragement and help, Tom Foley ran for Congress. In November, Washington's 5th Congressional District elected a new representative by a margin of 12,000 votes.
When I was first elected to Congress, the only speeches that we heard the first week were admonitions to keep our ears open and our mouths shut, so to speak, and come back in 2 years. If you're reelected, we'll take you more seriously.
He was reelected, and in 1974 became chairman of the Democratic Study Group, and a year later, chairman of the Agriculture Committee. Tom Foley married Heather Strawn, then a third-year law student, in December of 1968. The third member of the Foley household is Alice, a 15-year-old Belgian Shepherd. Alice feels quite at home in the Capitol office.
As he worked his way up through the leadership positions, it was clearly because he just overwhelmingly was respected and recognized by the members of his own party.
In 1977, Tom Foley was elected chairman of the Democratic Caucus. 4 years later, he was named Majority Whip by Speaker Tip O'Neill.
"30 years in Congress and former ambassador, Speaker of the House, Tom Foley made a lot of friends. And it's my pleasure to introduce you to one of them right now. I want you to put your hands together and welcome one of Tom's lifelong friends, United States Federal Judge Justin Quackenbush.
In watching Bob Briley's video, I see why they called on me first. Tom and I were born in the same year at the same hospital, but I want the record to be clear, he's much older than I. Our fathers were good friends, and I've often referred to that as the Hilliard connection. My father was the football coach at Hilliard High School, the predecessor of John Rogers High School. Tom's grandfather had his career at the Great Northern Railroad out there in Hilliard. Tom's father, Ralph E. Foley, was a renowned left-handed pitcher for the Hilliard Boosters. Tom's father and my father were close friends. They both went to law school at night at Gonzaga while holding down their day jobs. My father is the football coach, and as I recall, Tom, your dad was working at a service station. Our fathers both became deputy prosecuting attorneys. They both became Superior Court judges, and if you ever go back into the newspaper election reports in the 30s and 40s, they were the greatest vote getters that this county ever saw. I was called back into the Korean War while I was in law school at the University of Idaho. And when I came back, I finished my education at Gonzaga University Law School and worked days as Judge Foley's courtroom deputy. I learned an awful lot about the law and a lot about judging. And I think the most important thing, Tom, that your father taught me was to have compassion. And I recall, even though I was not a young law student, sitting there in court watching Judge Foley sentence someone to a long term in prison as he was required to do. And then the lawyers would tell me afterwards what a great judge their client thought Judge Foley was, and he was. Tom and I then became deputy prosecuting attorneys together, and the county prosecutor's office, I think there were 6 of us handling criminal cases. I have no idea how many there are now. Included in our 6, Leo Driscoll, and I would imagine Leo's here, Jim Conley, and Frank Johnson. In 1964, I was practicing law with that great lawyer, Jack Dean. Many of you will remember Jack. He was chairman of the Spokane County Democratic Central Committee, and I recall distinctly one of the great things that he took pride in was being a delegate to the National Convention in Los Angeles and casting a vote for John F. Kennedy. In 1963, Tom came into our office and he said, "I'm going to run for Congress and I want you to be my campaign manager." And I said, "Tom, we have a busy law practice. The political end of things are handled by Jack Dean." And he said, "No, I want you to be the campaign manager." And I said, "Tom, I just don't think that I should do that because, as you know, if I agree to do it, it won't be a mere nominal thing because he thought the Foley Quackenbush name in this county was important. And he came back 2 weeks, and I ended up his campaign manager. I think the statute of limitations has run against any monetary offense that I will reveal. In 1964, the incumbent Walter Rand, who was a friend of both of our families, was well entrenched with money. I think he had something like $200,000. The entire 1964 campaign, Tom's campaign, we spent $80,000. We raised $60,000. And I remember the great debate that we had when we put on a fundraiser in the Marie Antoinette room at the Davenport Hotel. Would we dare charge $50 a plate? We did successfully. That campaign was an enlightening thing because while I had known Tom all of our lives, I was so impressed with the fact that Tom stressed that that campaign against the 22-year incumbent Walter Rand was to be a positive one, and there was to be no negative aspect to our campaigning. And that was the rule. I hope there are some here who remember that 64 campaign and our slogan. We had a picture of Tom walking down the Capitol steps, and on our billboards and all our ads, we had our new man in Congress. And that's the way that campaign was run. Tom Foley is the most personally and intellectually honest man I ever met. And I think that showed throughout his career in Congress, where the issues were addressed on a positive basis, not on a negative basis. Unfortunately, we see so much of that today, as Randy Shaw has said. On a final note, when President Carter nominated me in 1979 to the federal bench, we, of course, all have a hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee. And one of the things I will always remember, Tom, is your being there and telling the Senate Judiciary Committee that your ability to speak on behalf of my confirmation was one of the greatest things that you had enjoyed as a member of Congress. And I thank you. I thanked you then. I thank you now. As you know, the United States Courthouse is now, and has been for some time, the Thomas S. S stands for Stephen Foley United States Courthouse. And our federal court has a great legacy attributable to a large extent by Tom's efforts. In 1964, when Tom was elected, there was one federal judge for all of Eastern Washington. We had no magistrate judge. We had a part-time commissioner. We had no bankruptcy judges. We had a referee in bankruptcy. When Tom saw the workload that existed, and I refreshed his recollection on that, he wasted no time in assisting us in obtaining the additional judicial help that we needed then and need now. As a result, instead of one judge We have 4 active judges, and some of those so-called senior judges who just don't know it's time to retire. We have 2 full-time magistrate judges, and we have 2 full-time bankruptcy judges. That legacy is appropriate, and it's appropriate to have Tom's name on this courthouse here in Spokane. Tom, I wish you and Heather the best, and Marie and I send our best regards to both of you. Thank you very much.
We're listening live to the broadcast for Tom Foley at the Bing Crosby Theater. Thank you for joining us this evening. We return to the podium with Randy Shaw.
The judge mentioned 2 words that the news media never likes to hear: clean campaign. Not far from here, there's an institution that spawned a lot of great people, Gonzaga University. Tom attended GU for a time, and it's my pleasure to introduce you now to the Executive Vice President of Gonzaga, Marty Martin, and the Student Body President, Johnny Draxler.
Good evening. Gonzaga is proud to be present to pay tribute to one of our former students, Tom Foley. During his years as an undergraduate, Speaker Foley honed his skills as a first-class debater and absorbed the key values that a Jesuit education offers: the importance of service to others, a commitment to justice, and a desire to make the world a better place for all. A cornerstone of the Gonzaga campus is the Foley Library, completed in 1992. Speaker Foley was instrumental in helping us turn our dream of a state-of-the-art facility into a reality, a library center to serve our students, our community, and through distance education learning capabilities, the world beyond our doors. When the university approached Tom about naming the center in his honor, he chose instead to name it after his parents. And so it remains today, the Ralph E. and Helen Higgins Foley Center. Another example of Tom's generosity of spirit and appreciation for those who inspired and nurtured him. We are very proud to claim Tom's father, Judge Foley, as an honored alum who also served as a member of our law school faculty. The university's enduring connection to the speaker and his family is a source of pride to us all. Gonzaga will always be grateful for Tom's attentiveness to the entire Spokane community during his congressional career. Every time a student hikes or bikes the Centennial Trail that borders our campus, we remember. The trail is a testament to an individual who had one guiding principle for public service, and that is, do things that are helpful to people. Although most, perhaps many of our students were not alive during Tom's 30-year congressional career, they know and love all that he has accomplished and the values he represents. He is an essential part of our university fabric and community, and he will forever be a ZAG. Thank you.
As Mr. Martin was saying, Tom Foley has served as an excellent example of what a Speaker of the House should do, especially to me as a poli-sci major. And unfortunately, contemporary examples haven't been as helpful to me, but we're glad to have that help. So I just wanted to give a message to Tom Foley, to you personally. Mr. Ambassador, what you accomplished for our community and for our country continues to be an inspiration to Gonzaga students. In terms of values, you stood up for what you believed, even when it wasn't popular. Throughout your life, you were civically engaged in your community, whether that was the Spokane community, the national community, or even the international community. You shaped our political dialogue in such a way that provided a voice for those who needed it most. And because of this legacy, you remind us as Gonzaga students that we can do extraordinary things after graduation while staying true to our values. Mr. Ambassador, you're an inspiration to many, including me personally, and on behalf of the Gonzaga students, I just wanted to say thank you for all that you've done.
You know, Tom Foley went over to Western Washington to get his law degree at the University of Washington. And here now is the Dean of the University of Washington School of Law, Kelly Testi.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm just delighted to be here with you for this spectacular occasion, honoring a man who's truly worthy of the praise and admiration that's being bestowed upon him this evening. It's clear that Speaker Foley is not just a person who has impacted people personally, and as we've heard, that's been deeply felt by so many, but he's also left a legacy of good works and public service, the kind of man, as we've noted, for whom courthouses and federal buildings and libraries are named, and the kind of man whose very name can bring together people from all corners of our state and our country on a very hot summer night. The mission of our law school, the University of Washington, from which Speaker Foley graduated in 1957 and where I'm now the dean, is to create leaders for the global common good. And I can think of very, very few people who embody the spirit of that mission more than Tom Foley, a tireless advocate for those he served as a prosecutor, state attorney general, congressman, and of course, Speaker of the House. Speaker Foley once described to us the fulfillment he received from contributing to the public good and making a positive difference as what he termed psychic income. He encouraged attorneys considering their careers to keep this benefit in mind. Rather than become, for instance, a highly paid lobbyist after his service in Congress, he continued instead to serve the public as a member of a number of international councils and commissions. Deeply interested in history, he's an internationalist, and many countries have honored him with their very highest awards. The psychic income he received from doing good, he paid forward. He paid that forward to others all around the world and established an enduring model of global engagement and of leadership. Throughout his career, we've admired Speaker Foley's emphasis on fairness, on justice, and on mutual respect. And those values have allowed him to build bridges and turn opponents into allies. His intelligence, his integrity have served him and his constituents so very well. Speaker Foley is one of a very select group of people to have received the University of Washington's highest alumni honor, given to those who personify our tradition of excellence and of service. I know he's a Zag, and I honor that. We're also proud to call him a Husky. We're deeply grateful for his long service to our university, to our state, to our nation, and the world. Speaker Foley, we give our love to you, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you very much.
You know, it's Tom's talent as a great debater and a lawyer that helped him climb to power on Capitol Hill from Majority Leader to Speaker of the House. And we want you to look now at another documentary clip covering the highlights of those important roles in our history.
He really is seeking bills that are in the public interest. And when a legislator does that, he's the kind of person you look to.
He's one of the real unique men and women on the American political scene in either party.
He's fair, busts his butt to be fair.
I've had, I think, through a variety of experiences, a sense of what's the possible, and that's supposed to be what politics is, the art of the possible.
Congressman Tom Foley yesterday was elected Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. We're proud of Tom Foley in Eastern Washington. He's one of us. That's why we're honoring him with this program. A day in the life of Tom Foley starts early. Work begins the moment he leaves his Embassy Row apartment. The first stop of the day, CBS News for a live nationwide interview. Next, it's off to the office in the Capitol building.
He's a first-class congressman, no doubt about it. Very able, capable, articulate, does his homework. His strong point with me is his candidness, openness, forthrightness, and honesty. We don't pull any punches. We've built the kind of rapport between one another now that he can meet in my office here, and I can, if we want to make it just confidential between the two of us, that's the way it'll remain. The membership on both sides of the aisle have a high degree of confidence in him and feel he's honest and forthright with them.
He was thorough in his study and his understanding of issues. And if Tom Foley were to become Speaker, the whole House would change in the way it presented itself to the public, the way it acted with the Senate, the way in which it would interact with the White House of any president.
I have always identified him as kind of the consul of the House, the attorney of the House, because he's the guy who's going to sit back and tell you both sides of an issue and then what's the right way to go. And that's the best attorney you can have.
I have come to the conclusion that despite our differences in the past, this is one occasion when the president's position is right.
When Tip O'Neill retired in 1987, Jim Wright became Speaker. Tom Foley was elected Majority Leader by acclamation.
I do, so help me God.
And now, Speaker, the highest legislative office in the country, and second in the line of succession to the presidency, the job for which many say Tom Foley is uniquely qualified.
This is, as a matter of fact, a state that's famous for its ticket splitting. People who are in politics like to be covered, whether it's ego or recognition, whatever you want to call it.
He is called upon as often as anyone for the network talk shows and is widely regarded as the best of his party's spokesmen and advocates.
There is a tendency, of course, I think, in the national media, that the more you are called on, the more you are called on. And so it tends to be a little bit of a self-perpetuating thing, but I enjoy it.
We could schedule him every single weekend and every single day from, say, 7 in the morning on without any difficulty. The problem really is to find him some free time.
I like the job. I like the opportunity it gives me to be in the center of congressional affairs and to have some impact on events. You get the satisfaction as a member of Congress out of knowing that regardless of whether anybody else knows it or not, this action you took or that action you took might have had some positive effect on decisions and on public policy. I don't want to make a decision yet. I think we're going to have to go up there and talk to him a little bit about it. One of the things that I hope I bring to that kind of a process is a focus on the task, and focus on what you want to try to achieve, and being able to sort of eliminate as much as possible the emotions, the philosophical clashes, the personalities, the side issues, all those things that can distract from decision.
Tom Foley's ability to balance policy, leadership, and politics resulted in being named the most effective and respected member of Congress in a survey of senior congressional aides.
Part, I think, of being a good negotiator or getting the job done is keeping your eye on the ball, having a respect for the opinions of others, understanding what they say and how they feel, putting yourself in their shoes, so to speak, and in trying to find a solution that meets as much as possible the common need without anybody having to suffer a great deal of defeat or embarrassment or rejection.
Although Tom Foley's traits include caution and cooperation, he can often be tough and will occasionally display some anger.
And that's what we will do if we have the good faith and support of people on both sides of the aisle, and I suggest it is not helpful to suggest other motives and actions here. One of the things you have to draw from this job is that you won't be recorded in history, and there won't be Chapter 12 on the congressional career of Tom Foley or somebody else, but that when you leave it, you want to be able to say and think honestly to yourself that things were better for your having been there.
Right now, we would like to present a short proclamation and more for Tom. Please welcome Spokane Mayor David Condon and Spokane City Council President Ben Stucker.
Mr. Speaker, things are better because you represented us. But tonight I'm here with Ben to pay tribute, and we're humbled on behalf of the citizens of Spokane to thank you as the representative and the congressman for the 5th Congressional District. Truly, your fingerprints are all over Eastern Washington and specifically Spokane. Your legacy lives on in so many ways through our continued growth of the University District, which truly is the center of our future, the center of our kids of tomorrow, in so many ways, and boasts the entrepreneurial spirit that I think was so innovative in your approach as the Speaker of the House. So on behalf of the citizens of Spokane, the Council President and I are humbled by the opportunity to read this proclamation in honor of the Speaker and his continued commitment to Eastern Washington and his service to our citizens.
City of Spokane Proclamation. Whereas Tom Foley was born in Spokane, Washington, March 6, 1929, doesn't say the time of day, graduated from Gonzaga University, later attended the University of Washington, and earned his law degree. He would later move to Washington, D.C. and run for Congress in 1964.
And whereas Tom Foley was nominated to be the chairman of the House Agricultural Committee, was chosen for the House Majority Whip, moved to the House Majority Leader in 1989, and later served as the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, representing Washington's 5th District, making him the first Speaker from the west of the Rocky Mountains to hold this office, and later being appointed as Ambassador to Japan. And
whereas Tom Foley is recognized for his selfless service and the commitment to public service, it is with great respect, honor, and privilege that the City of Spokane recognizes the contributions he has made to our community and to our federal government.
Now, therefore, I, David A. Condon, the Mayor of Spokane, do hereby proclaim Wednesday, July 24th, 2013, as a day of celebration of the life and the times of our beloved statesman, Speaker, and our Congressman, Thomas Stephen Foley, in the city of Spokane, and encourage our citizens in honoring this most outstanding public servant of our local community and truly our nation. Sure. The Council President and I would just also want to comment, we had the great opportunity to present by way of one of his fellow staffers, Todd Woodard, the key to the city. And I just recently received a text. He received that key last night, and I asked Todd Woodard, I go, so how did it go, Todd? He responded, by the way, he's delayed in air traffic in D.C. He said, yes, we talked for about 3 hours last night. He was genuinely appreciative of the key and the gesture offered in the video. We couldn't stop talking about Eastern Washington. So, on behalf of the city, on behalf of the citizens of Spokane, I just wanted to make you aware that he received that key. He had not received a key from the city of Spokane, and it is our key of the city of choice, and he truly was part of making our city so amazing and truly the city of choice of the Northwest.
Tom served under 2 presidents, and I have in my hand a letter to Tom from one of them. I had the opportunity to travel with this gentleman during his first campaign for the White House, and he ran against and lost to Ronald Reagan in his home state of Texas, but he still wound up vice president and then later president of the United States. In his own family, he's known simply as 41. Here are the words from George H.W. Bush. I wish I could be there in Spokane to add my personal good wishes and respects as you are appropriately honored by your fellow Washingtonians. When I think of Tom Foley, I think about an outstanding public servant. I think about honor, about decency and integrity. I think about love of country and service to others. For 30 years, you worked tirelessly for the people of your state and indeed for all Americans. And as Speaker, you were fair and worked well with both sides of the political aisle. As Ambassador to Japan, you represented our country superbly, quickly earning the respect of the Japanese people. This special recognition serves as another wonderful reminder of the standard you set for professional ethics and hard work. Both Barbara and I join in saluting you, and we send you our warmest regards and respects. Sincerely, your friend, George Bush, number 41. Tom also served as Speaker with President Bill Clinton, and I have a letter from him as well. Dear Tom, it's a great honor for me to add my voice to all of those gathered in Spokane right now to celebrate your remarkable lifetime of public service. Throughout your long career in Congress, you were as knowledgeable a lawmaker as has ever served, with the political skills and courage to match. You were unafraid to reach out to your colleagues across the aisle, recognizing that principled compromise is an essential foundation of our democracy rather than a sign of weakness. You always delivered for those who counted on you, and not once in 30 years did your personal ambition ever outweigh the concerns of your constituents or stand in the way of smart policy. I remain deeply grateful for your tireless efforts as Speaker to pass off some of the most important legislation of my presidency, including the 1993 Economic Plan and the crime bill, for which you paid a dear price. I also appreciate your outstanding service as ambassador to Japan, where you did much to advance a partnership between our two countries. Thank you for your dedication to the people of Washington and the entire country, and I am proud to call you my friend. Sincerely, Bill. Yes, indeed. The Thomas S. Foley Institute for Public Policy and Public Service was established at Washington State University. It was to honor Tom's service to our district and our nation. Please welcome the director of the Institute, Dr. Cornell Clayton.
Well, Rich told me I was going to have to follow the mayor. I didn't know I was going to have to follow two presidents as well. It's quite a task. I just returned home last night from speaking in Washington, D.C. at a congressional symposium sponsored by the Institute for Civility in Government. And before I left, I had the opportunity to stop by and see Speaker Foley and Heather. And I'm happy to report that he was in very good spirits and still has his good sense of humor. We spent about 2 hours talking, and as many of you know, he can tell a story like nobody else. He still revels in telling about his experiences in public life and also discussing current politics and political leaders. He hasn't lost one bit of interest in that. And it was really a great pleasure. But he wanted me to convey to all of his friends back here in Spokane his warm wishes and his greetings. He wanted me to tell you how grateful he was for those of you who have organized this event and how deeply honored he is by it. Let me just say, on my way home last night on the airplane, I was reading a new book that's come out by two political scientists named Jacob Hacker and Paul Pearson, entitled Winner Take All Politics. And it's a terrific read. And I was thinking at the time, it just struck me in reading that book and also reflecting on some of the conversations about the lack of civility in our politics today that I'd had earlier up on Capitol Hill, how far our politics has drifted from the dignity, the honor that the long service of Tom Foley represented. The other thing that struck me was one of the points that Hacker and Pearson keep coming back to in their book is how important it is for our elected officials not only to serve us well when they're in office, but to leave behind institutional legacies that continue to support their values and their goals long after they leave public service. So I think it's so deeply appropriate for us to be gathering here today and to be talking about those institutions that Tom Foley built that will continue to serve the people here in Eastern Washington and Spokane for years to come. For those of you who don't know much about the Foley Institute, we as Randy said, we were formed in 1995 to honor the service of Speaker Foley. At that time, we were a very small organization. We had a couple of cramped offices down in the bowels of one of the buildings on campus. But since that time, thanks to a congressional grant, thanks to support from WSU, thanks to generous contributions from private individuals and others, we have built the Institute into one of the leading centers in the Western United States for educating the public about democratic institutions and public policy, and for encouraging young people to go into public service. We have just recently moved our institute into brand new facilities right in the center of campus. We're in Bryan Hall, which is an iconic clock tower. We have spacious new facilities that have been completely remodeled. We can now display much of the congressional furniture and other memorabilia and artifacts that Tom Foley collected in his lifelong service to the public. And I want to invite all of you to come down and visit us whenever you can, and also to come to our events. The Foley Institute tries to continue Tom Foley's tremendous legacy of public service in at least three ways. First, we try to support public policy research, and we do that through scholarships, fellowships, and professorships for individuals working in the area of public policy and democratic institutions. Secondly, we support and try to encourage a more informed democratic debate, and we do that by hosting conferences, symposia, and public speakers. All these events are free and open to the public. We hold them not only on campus at WSU, but regularly up here in Spokane, in Olympia, in Seattle, and elsewhere across the state. And then finally, and I think in many ways most importantly in terms of Speaker Foley's great legacy, we try to engage young people in democratic politics. And we try to get them interested in careers in public service. And we do this in many different ways, but primarily through internships. We've literally assisted hundreds of young people over the years, serve internships in Washington, D.C., in Olympia, and elsewhere in both state and local government and federal agencies. And you would be surprised, I was just saying, telling one of our other guests down here, that young people come back from these experiences regularly and tell you how they have transformed their lives and how they have now look upon public service in a very different way and with new respect. And I'm happy to report that many of our former Foley interns are now making their own way into public service, either in elected careers or in other capacities, and I expect that to grow in the future. Let me just close by once again noting the career of Tom Foley was really one about dignity, respect, bipartisan cooperation. I think you saw that in the fact that he might have been both a Zag and a Husky, but his institute is deeply crimson, and we are very proud to have it at WSU. For those of you, again, I want to invite you all to come to the Foley Institute. For those of you who'd like more information, we have a table out front where you can sign up, and you can go to Facebook and like us, and you will receive invitations to our events. Let me again thank all of you for coming out today, and let me thank Rich and others for organizing this terrific event.
You know, many of you might be surprised to learn that Tom Foley almost didn't run for Congress back in 1964. And this next video is courtesy of Don Hamilton, when 8 years ago, Tom himself recalled his decision to run for office, and he did it right at the last minute. Take a look.
Scoop had encouraged me to run for Congress in 1963 when I worked for him, but I didn't really do very much about it. And so I came out a couple of days before filing was going to end in 1964, and I had lunch at the City Club. And the City Club then and now has mostly Republican members. But there was a table of Democrats, and I sat down, and I was explaining how I was going to run 2 years from now. And Joe Drumheller came in, sat down. Of course, Joe was a great friend of Warren Magnuson. He was his unappointed unofficial representative in Spokane, I think. And so I told this to Joe, and he said, "No, you won't. You won't run 2 years from now." And I said, "Yes, I will, Joe." "No, you won't." "Well, how do you know I will?" "Well, you're just like all young people." Marcus, hear this. He said, "You think that the Democratic Party is going to come to you with a Tiffany tray and an engraved invitation, humbly begging you to run for Congress. It doesn't work that way. You either got the nerve and whatever part of the anatomy to go out there and do it, or you don't. And you're telling us that you don't. So it made me so angry that I said, well, Joe, I'm not talking about financial support, but I'd just like to know if I went, would I have your support? Absolutely. I got up and walked across the grill and into the lobby of the club and to the telephone and called Western Union and sent 3 telegrams to Scoop Jackson resigning my job and telling him that I was going to run for Congress, and calling my bank, the Northwestern Bank, and finding that I had $350 overdrawn. So I called Hank Higgins, my well-off cousin, and said, Hank, I got to borrow $5,000. He says, what do you want $5,000 for? I said, I want to run for Congress. He said, I'll give you 5. I'll give you 10. I'll give you 15 if they'll let me. And the next day, Hank and I went across the state, and at 4:30 in the afternoon, I found myself in the office of the Secretary of State and the Director of Elections. And I filed for Congress, and I was the only one who filed. And that afternoon, that evening, I was the nominee. Now, if Joe Drumheller hadn't come into the Spokane Club at about 1:30 on the 24th of June, 1964, I'm not sure I would have been in Congress.
During his service to our district, our state, and our country, Tom was covered by a lot of local reporters. And one of them is our next speaker, longtime reporter for the Spokesman Review, Karen Doran-Steele.
Good evening. I'm going to take a flashback in time here, too. Thank you. 3 reporters from the Spokesman Review, Paul Turner, Jim Camden, and I, arrived in the other Washington in the summer of 1989 to profile House Majority Leader Tom Foley, who'd just risen to one of the nation's highest positions, Speaker of the House of Representatives. He'd had 13 electoral victories by then. His peers rated him the most respected member of Congress, and the worst thing his critics were saying about him was that he was too cautious. He'd already racked up a number of firsts. Longest time in Congress in Washington state history, the first House Ag Committee chairman from the West, youngest committee chairman at age 45 in the 20th century. And now he was the first speaker from the far West, third in line to the presidency. As we walked the halls of Congress for insight into Foley's rise, his colleagues said he'd developed a personal relationship with almost all of them. Wyoming Republican Alan Simpson was colorful as usual. He told us, you feel good if you pick up a phone to Tom. He can tell you to go to hell and make you look forward to the trip. Foley's leadership style, as many people have already said, was highly different from today's highly ideological House. And he was a devotee of bipartisanship, a word that today seems almost quaint in the toxic climate we're in. Foley told me these instincts came from his formative years in Spokane, where, as we've heard, his father was a respected judge, his South Hill neighbors were mostly Republicans, and he practiced arguing both sides of every issue at the Gonzaga Prep and GU debate teams. Foley had a long-standing fascination with world affairs. He knew all of the foreign ambassadors in Washington, D.C. And while we were doing our research, Washington Post political writer David Broder was suggesting that Foley was really presidential timber because of his talent for moving the big issues, noting that Foley was the only member of Congress to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner with Mikhail Gorbachev when the Soviet president visited in 1988. Foley, however, told me he didn't have that necessary gnawing ambition to run for president and did not fantasize about Hail to the Chief. By the time Foley became Speaker, the relationship between the press and politicians had changed. Watergate was a major factor, and those of us who broke into journalism in that era had a built-in skepticism about politicians and institutions. We'd been trained not to get too close. But Foley could be disarming. He could give a reporter a glacial stare, but he relaxed easily into that role of Irish storyteller, drawing on his mental Rolodex of political lore. He also, importantly, accepted the adversary role of the press, and he also fought against what he called Potomac disease, taking oneself too seriously and forgetting one's roots. And Eastern Washington visits could certainly be an antidote to that disease. According to his 5th District aide, Janet Gilpatrick, Foley showed up once as a VIP at the Omak Stampede, dressed in a cowboy hat with his dress shoes on. He'd been assured that the horse they gave him was pretty tame, but when it was slapped on the rump, it shot off, and Foley had to clutch the saddle for dear life as it careened around the track. Well, the OMAC announcer said laconically, "We can see that Mr. Foley has not been taking horseback riding lessons in Washington, D.C." Well, as you know, by the mid-1990s, the public mood had shifted. There were calls for term limits. Incumbents were under assault. The scandals of Bill Clinton's second term hurt Democrats. And Foley, eerily reminiscent of the recent tragedy at Newtown, Connecticut, had spoken out in favor of restrictions on assault weapons after a mentally ill man went on a murder spree at Fairchild Air Force Base. That unleashed the wrath of the NRA, which targeted him. He went down in the 1994 GOP takeover of the House. According to exit polls that year, some Spokane voters thought Foley's Republican successor would automatically become House Speaker. They'd apparently missed a few civics lessons. With Tom Foley, Spokane reached the height of its political clout. While he was sometimes assailed both from the right and the left, his ideal of public service was to use government to improve the lives of Americans. Compare Foley's ideal of government service to this week's statement by the current House Speaker, John Boehner, that his role is not to create legislation, but to repeal it. You decide who has the best interests of the American people at heart. Thank you.
Randy Shaw.
Senator Patty Murray and Tom served together in a Washington State congressional delegation. She wishes that she could be here tonight, but the Senate is back in session, but she sends her greetings in this video.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting me to join you in paying tribute to an incredible leader, dedicated public servant and statesman, and tireless advocate for the great state of Washington, Tom Foley. You know, years ago when I first came to Washington, D.C. as a newly elected senator, Tom was serving as Speaker of the House. And even though he was overwhelmingly busy, he went out of his way to welcome me with open arms and help me transition to my new life in the other Washington. That's the kind of man Tom is. No matter how busy he may be, he takes time to look after his own. I will never forget his generosity and graciousness as he welcomed me to Congress, reminding me that though we were far from home, we were surrounded by fellow Washingtonians and united by our common goal of serving the people of our state. I would not be where I am today without Tom's support and encouragement. Tom has given so much back to Washington, and his legacy can be seen everywhere, but especially with all of you tonight in his hometown, the great city of Spokane. Tom was responsible for securing 100 acres of land for Expo 74 in downtown Spokane, land that would later become Riverfront Park and the University District. His legacy can be seen all over Eastern Washington, from the veterinary school he helped secure funding for, and the Public Policy Institute that bears his name, to Highway 395 connecting Ritzville and the Tri-Cities, to the federal courthouse in downtown Spokane that bears his name. From the Centennial Trail to the cleanup of Liberty Lake, Tom has given so much to Eastern Washington, and his legacy will endure. Tom, you have touched so many during your years of public service to our state and nation. I'm proud to join with your friends and family and all of Washington State in thanking you for your incredible leadership and your unwavering dedication. It is truly an honor to call you a friend. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Community activist Ivan Bush had many positive interactions with Tom, and he'd like to share a few words with you about that. Ivan.
Ooh. There's a quote. There's a dream in this land. If the dream is saved for one, it must be saved for all. As I thought about being asked to bring a few words, I began to think about the essence of a man. The essence of a man. I didn't know Congressman Foley, like the judge or others of you here. I got the chance when I was a community servant at a community center here in town. And his staff, Todd and Janet Kilpatrick, called us one day and said that the congressman would like to visit the community center. I said, certainly. But I must say, at the time, I felt that it was just going to be a cameo, picture-taking kind of visit. Wow, was I wrong. He came to the center, we showed him around. Then I thought they were getting ready to go. He said, no, we have time. I said, fantastic. Assemble some of our tenants. We go into the conference room. He takes off his coat and rolls up his sleeves. I said, whoa, we certainly didn't expect this. He listened intently for the issues. Here's a person that spent time regularly with world leaders. He wanted to find out how the little person was doing and gave that genuine attention. It wasn't a cameo. It wasn't a picture-taking event. He wanted to hear what the people had to say. And ever since then, I've been a fan. He even came back for a follow-up meeting. And I guess he kind of saw the skepticism on my face when I first met him. And he said, you know, you didn't think I was coming back, did you? I said, yes, sir, I did. But those times were so, I think, beneficial to low and no income folks in a neighborhood. And I like to think that I've grown as a person through that interaction. He gave me the opportunity to serve on the military academy board that was here in Spokane. I knew we had some bright kids in Eastern Washington, but these were young geniuses. You know, to have the opportunity to serve and to have that feeling that you have so much respect for a person, you just can't let them down. You can't disappoint them. So I was like a student in preparation for our academy board meetings. So, like I say, I didn't get to know him as well as a bunch of you folks, but I got a chance to get a great feel for a great person. You know, in my community, there's a saying, a couple of sayings. One is that service is the rent we pay for our existence here on earth. That's the rent we pay. That man paid a lot of rent. The other is, and I'll close with this. We have this saying in my community. God's gift to us is the gift of talent. Our gift back to God is the use of that talent. Tom Foley's talent to serve the 5th District, his country, and humanity was non-paralleled. He epitomized the term true statesman. He epitomized the term true statesman. Thank God for Tom Foley.
When our current governor, Jay Inslee, was first elected to Congress, he too served with Tom. And the governor sends his regards along with this message.
I'm Jay Inslee, and it is a huge honor to be able to join you in this tribute to Speaker Tom Foley. And I think it's really appropriate that it's in the Bing Crosby Theater. And the reason is that I really believe what Bing Crosby was to the world of music, Speaker Tom Foley has been to the state of Washington and to American democracy. I had a huge honor of getting to serve in Congress for a term with adjoining districts with Speaker Foley. He represented the 5th District, and I represented Central Washington in the 4th District. And I learned something about Speaker Foley that I just want to share, 2 attributes that I think are world class. First, his dedication to democratic principle, and second, his dedication to the people of his district and to this country. First, principle. I've known a lot of people in public life for the last couple of decades, but I can truly say Tom Foley has been a giant when it comes to honoring democratic principles with a small d. I saw him time and time make decisions that were in the best traditions of the Founding Fathers and the very idea of democracy and how we need to make it work in this country. I want to just tell you one short story. I was in a ski lodge at Mission Ridge up in Wenatchee years ago when I was serving with Speaker Foley, and I saw this article about the fact back in 1965, when he was a freshman from Spokane, Washington, he had to take an extremely difficult political vote. It was involving the potential expulsion of Adam Clayton Powell. It was an extremely contentious issue at the time. He was a brand new freshman congressman from Spokane, Washington. And frankly, he was called upon to make a decision that would have responded to the passions of the moment, the desires of an extremely visible issue, and a very controversial member of the House of Representatives. Or he had to take a vote that was going to really reflect his views of the United States Constitution and the role of the U.S. House of Representatives. And he cast a vote that was very much to his disadvantage politically, but one that was hewed to his constitutional views. And I asked him why he did that. And he simply said, because it was the right thing to do. And very early in his career, within the first couple months, he cast a vote that put him in political jeopardy, but was the right vote for the U.S. Constitution. And subsequently, the U.S. Supreme Court held that he was entirely correct. This is a man of overpowering principle. But second, he is a person who cared about the people he represented. Doesn't matter who you were in the 5th District, for over decades of service in the U.S. House of Representatives, he cared about you. And I learned that one day. I was at the Okanagan County Fair. He used to represent Okanagan County in the 5th District, and then I, after redistricting, took over Okanagan County from him. And I'll never remember kind of an older fella came up to me and said, he said, young man, do you think you're going to be as good as a congressman as Tom Foley was when he represented this district? And I said, well, I don't know. What do you mean? And he said, well, I'll just tell you something about Congressman Tom Foley. He got me these teeth. It took me years to try to get the VA to get me some teeth. Tom Foley finally did it. And if you can be that kind of congressman, I might vote for you someday. Now, Tom Foley did a lot more than that for the people of the state of Washington. A national leader in his speaker's position and a fellow who never left in his heart in Spokane County. So it's an honor to pay tribute to him. I'll be thinking of him and Heather in the days to come. Thanks, Spokane County, for sending the country Speaker Tom Foley. Thanks.
As many of you know or have learned tonight, Tom was a member of the debate team at Gonzaga Prep. He had an amazing record there. The Thomas S. Foley Honorary Forensics Tournament is held now every year in his honor. And please welcome our next two guests. David Smith is the director, and Theora Rice was an award-winning participant.
You know, I grew up in Spokane. Bing Crosby graduated from Gonzaga, and he has this building named after him. Tom Foley graduated from Gonzaga, and he has the courthouse named after him. I graduated from Gonzaga, and I have my name on a mortgage. So there's where the similarities differ. But I grew up, and I debated during the 70s. Now, unlike Mr. Foley, I don't have people remembering how great a debater I was, and I try to keep that secret since I teach debate. But in the 70s, Mr. Foley came to my high school. Now, I grew up in the working class part of Spokane, and I only knew one Republican. It was my grandmother. Now, my mother was an English immigrant, and she couldn't vote because she wasn't a citizen. My dad would drive across town every election, take my grandmother to the polls so she could cancel out his vote. But I understood that we were talking about basic fairness. I grew up during the Watergate hearings, and there was a distaste for politics. And Mr. Foley came to my school. And I remember my friends saying, there's a man we can trust. There's a man who is good. Well, in the Foley tournament 2 years ago, the theme of the tournament was leading by example. Last year, the theme was from a man of honor and integrity to a future bright with promise. As a kid, after that time he visited our class in high school, some of us talked around and we said, who will be the next Tom Foley? Well, Mr. Foley, my generation let you down. My generation didn't seem to understand that the separation between the parties was an aisle, not a chasm. Someone in my generation once said, Mr. Foley is too fair. My generation didn't understand that it is impossible to be too fair. But the Foley Debate Tournament is putting out students who understand that it is impossible to be too fair. To win the Thomas Foley Speakers Award, a student must excel in congressional debate or international diplomacy, which you must argue in a foreign language, and a standard form of debate, and 4 dramatic or speaker events. That award winner is called the Thomas S. Foley Speakers Award winner, and let me introduce you to Theora Rice, one of our champion Foley Speakers Award winners.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. So a few months ago, my mother came up to me and gave me a t-shirt. She had just gotten back from helping out Mr. Smith run the Thomas S. Foley Debate Tournament and said that it was important I have this t-shirt because my name was on the front. Theora Rice, listed with 10 other students as proof that we had won one of the most prestigious awards in Washington State debate. We were all winners of the Thomas S. Foley Iron Man Award. The front of this shirt is a great memory to our achievement and reminds us daily of the skills that we developed in debate that will continue to support us throughout the rest of our lives. On the back of this t-shirt is a tribute to the man who inspired the award. Now, it's easy to list 11 names on one side of a shirt, but in order to fit and properly accommodate what a man Thomas S. Foley was to his community and to the people he supported, they had to shrink the font down to the point of where it's almost unreadable. This, to me, is an illustration of how great a man Thomas S. Foley was and how he served his people in many different aspects using multiple talents whenever he was needed. This, I'm sure, is what inspired the award that Mr. Smith mentioned, which required me to essentially run around a tournament like a chicken with my head cut off, trying to develop different talents, use different skills in speechcraft, and also find the topics, the important issues that needed to be discussed in order to make a difference, in order to make an impact on the people who were looking at me. These lessons are things that I have taken with me throughout the rest of my life. Even though high school was a long time ago, I have applied these to my college career and to my future career. In May this next year, I'll be graduating from the University of Idaho as a master's student in cybersecurity. My plan is to then work for the government so that I can protect my community, the people in it, and their resources. I can only hope to serve up to such an example as Thomas S. Foley set for me. So with looking to this future, I would like to thank Mr. Smith and my mother, who was the debate coach at Central Valley High School, for encouraging me to speak out and to take up the important issues. But most of all, I would like to thank you, Thomas S. Foley, for setting an example for me to aspire to not be afraid to discuss the hard issues, to not be afraid to develop multiple talents, especially in speechcraft, and not be afraid to serve my community and attempt to make a difference. Thank you very much.
It was rather unnerving for me, the fact that she never looked at a note once. When Maria Cantwell served in the U.S. House, she too served with Tom, and now Senator Cantwell recalls her time with Speaker Foley.
Today we come together to celebrate the remarkable service of House Speaker Tom Foley. Tom is a true legend and a proud son of Spokane. Tom was born in Spokane, went to Gonzaga Prep, Gonzaga University, and then later to the University of Washington. And starting in Spokane, Tom rose to become one of the nation's first Speakers of the House from west of the Rocky Mountains. He became one of the most powerful politicians in the country, but he never forgot where he came from. Tom Foley always fought for the 5th Congressional District and the state of Washington. And you can see his legacy everywhere you go in Eastern Washington. From the Foley Institute at WSU, to the Foley Federal Building in Spokane, to the Foley Center Library at Gonzaga, Tom Foley knew how to get things done. And he worked with presidents, both Democrats and Republicans, and what everybody says here is that everybody liked Tom Foley. He used his power in D.C. to fight for Eastern Washington. He successfully worked to help bring the World's Fair to Spokane in 1974. He created the Centennial Trail that runs from Riverside Park to Idaho along the Spokane River. And he led the fight to keep Fairchild Air Force Base open and continued to be invested for future growth. He was the main sponsor of a bill that extended the Grand Coulee Dam, which today is our nation's largest producer of hydroelectricity. And of course, Tom Foley was the king of agriculture. He was the first Westerner since the Civil War to chair the House Agricultural Committee. And he used that role to make sure that products grown in Eastern Washington made it to dinner tables all around the world. He was a leader in opening new markets to Asia and other countries for Northwest wheat and cherries. And he worked with both President Carter and President Reagan to continue the Columbia Basin irrigation project that kept water flowing in Eastern Washington. To quote Tom Foley, "A strong agricultural economy is absolutely essential for a strong national economy." That's what Tom Foley said in 1978, and it still rings true today. It's amazing what this boy from Spokane achieved. He had a meteoric rise in Congress from majority whip to majority leader to Speaker of the House, and he later served as ambassador to Japan. And Tom did this while still staying in touch with the residents of the 5th Congressional District. He hosted town meetings, he listened to constituents, and everybody would tell you there's nobody better on their feet than Tom Foley. He worked with everybody to get things done for our state and for our country. So today, the people of Washington would like to return our thanks to Tom Foley. We owe the son of Spokane a great debt of gratitude for a career of service, of working for our state and nation in a bipartisan fashion. Tom Foley, you are one of a kind, and we thank you for everything.
Another dear friend of Tom and Heather is here and with us tonight. She's been a dear friend, well, let's say for a really long time. Tom loved kids, and there were always plenty at her house. Would you please welcome Sally Jackson?
We're in the process of waiting as Sally makes her way up to the podium. Sally is known for her frank and often voicely talk. She's a character, and we'll have a little fun, I think, tonight with what she has to say. She's never been one to be quiet, and so she's making her way up to the podium now. Obviously, from the reaction when she was introduced, a lot of folks haven't seen her for a while. So good to have her around, and this should be very interesting.
Believe it or not, even with the cane, I still coach baseball and I still teach swimming. I love every minute. I was so happy when Rich called me. Invited me to speak tonight because this is a labor of love. I love Tom Foley. I love him. Our paths first crossed in 1964. The family was up camping at Curlew, and my great aunt, my mom, and I decided to go into Republic for a tall, cool one. And we were in a tavern there, and it was Republic Days, and Tom was campaigning. He came in, he worked the room, of course. He came over our table, introduced himself, shook hands, and we exchanged pleasantries. And my aunt's hearing was about what mine is now, a little bit shaky. And she heard him as Tom Dooley. And that was a very famous song at the time. Well, all she could talk about was that tall, handsome young man that shook her hand, Tom Dooley. And she talked about him till her dying day, but I don't think she could ever vote for him because, of course, there wasn't a Tom Dooley on the ballot. But she thought the world of him. While I was chair of the party, of course, the big deal was to have Tom come to your functions because you were assured that it was always going to be a fantastic success, sold out. Well, the call would go to Heather, and bless her heart, she would send him to Washington, 5-hour trip. He was always so pleasant, so great, and he'd be at our banquets, and he and I would sit side by side, and we both started a diet at the same time. Well, obviously one took and one didn't, but he'd have his little salad. Well, I joined him for that for about the first couple of banquets. Then after that, he was still on his salad, and I was reaching for the dinner rolls, you know. But what a great, great man he was. And he was, and that a great, great man he is. He was also kind enough to come to my house for a couple of functions. And what was so cool about him was he wouldn't be with the notable people that were there. He would be out under the walnut tree, kind of balancing back and forth on his chair, and he'd be chatting with the kids. And the kids would be spread around him, you know, on the grass. And he'd be talking about when he was young, when he was in school, when he was an attorney, and the kids would be listening wide-eyed to him because his sense of humor, of course, is so fabulous that he kept the kids so interested. And luckily, I was with him the night that he was named Speaker of the House. He happened to be at a banquet at the Ridpath for us, and it was an education to see the way that he, of course, all the national press was there, and it was a frenzy. It was wonderful to see the way that he handled everyone, his calmness, his wonderful humility, his sense of humor, and his intelligence is just overwhelming. And it was so great to see him that night. And of course, all of us were thrilled to see somebody that's that deserving get national recognition and a national spot. We talked about the debate tournament that Dave has. Bless his heart, he lets me give the award for the Foley tournament. And if you've got a night in February, early February, with nothing to do, it would be great to go and see the tournament because all these kids are so bright, like we saw with Miss Rice, and they're so articulate. And what's wonderful is their hero isn't the man with the red cape and the big red S on his chest. Their hero is Tom Foley. And they learn all about him. They learn all of his wonderful attributes. And he becomes a role model for them. What a wonderful role model that is. And and the beauty of it is that these kids go out into the world and they'll be doing it year after year with Tom Foley values. And that's something of him that will just continue on and on and on. How wonderful. How wonderful. As we know, a lot of big money, a lot of power, a lot of heavy hitters came out in 1994, and we lost our beloved Tom Foley. In the morning, my vice chair called me and said, "How you doing, Sal?" I said, "Didn't sleep a wink." He said, "Neither did I." And he said, "What are we going to do?" And I said, "Why don't we go down to Tom's office and see how he's doing?" So Larry and I went down, droopy-faced, of course, and we got in there, and Tom says, "Hey, don't feel bad." He said, "I've been doing this for 30 years. I've had a long ride." He said, "Heather and I haven't been able to do the things that we would like to do." He said, "We're finally going to have a chance to do these things and live our life now on a different plane." And he had us feeling good in almost no time at all. Well, there was a knock on the door, and a fella in a McDonald uniform, or whatever you want to call it, was at the door. And he said, "Mr. Foley, I have your order." He said, "I've got a Big Mac, a chocolate shake, and a large order of French fries." Wasn't salad, so I knew that that he really was human after all. Well, of course, you know, he didn't retire. He became ambassador to Japan and was on so many high-level committees, so many high-level commissions, and what a great man. His life has always been servitude to the people. So, Tom, I would just like to say to you, thanks for being our guardian angel for all these years, for the people of the 5th District and for the citizens. I've just got to tell you that I was lobbying for juvenile justice funds in Washington, D.C., and of course Tom opened doors for me. And then he said, now he's Speaker of the House, he said, "Sal, come on over," and he said, "We'll have a little chat." So I get to go into the inner office of the Speaker's room. That's pretty cool. And then he had his old assistant, Werner Brandt, babysit me till he got done with his work. And Tom came in, and there wasn't pomp and circumstance. It was 2 middle-aged Spokane natives sitting down and gossiping about what was going in Spokane and what was going on with the people of Spokane. It was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful. And the sweet man that he was, it was so much fun to spend that much time with him. So I want to thank you, Tom, for being such a remarkable hero. What a hero for us to look up to. What a hero for kids to look up to. And most of all, I want to thank you just for being Tom Foley, because we all love you so much. Thank you.
Well, I'll have to admit that wasn't as racy as she can be at times, but it was good to hear and good to see her, and she's being helped down the stairs now. Sally Jackson, very involved in Democrat politics and the Valley.
As we begin to wrap things up here, as a new member of Congress back in the 1960s, Tom's first introduction to a man named Lyndon Baines Johnson was indeed memorable. Let's let Tom himself tell you the story. This video is courtesy of Avatar Studios.
When I first got elected to Congress, I was elected in the year that Lyndon Johnson was elected president, 1964. But I had never really had very much acquaintance with Vice President Johnson. And I was sitting in the lounge at Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C., and a United agent came on board and said, "Is there Congressman Foley on board?" And I raised my hand. And then in a very loud voice, he said, "Mr. Congressman, President Johnson is calling for you urgently. Please come with me. We will hold the lounge." Well, frankly, I was pretty impressed because I don't think I'd formally been introduced to the president. And I saw this telephone with the phone off the hook, and I picked it up. And the voice on the other end said, "Congressman Foley?" I said, "Yes, Thomas Foley of Washington, yes." Mr. Congressman, this is the White House switchboard. Would you hold now for the president? And a few seconds later, a familiar Texas voice comes on the line and said, John. And I said, no, Mr. President, Tom Foley. And I can't say this at the table, it would be a little impolite to do, but there followed a string of four-letter words that would make a sailor blush, as the line goes, ending with a long four-letter word pronounced in two syllables beginning with S, which said, I wanted John Fogerty of Rhode Island, not you. Phone was hung up. It was the most depressing moment of my political career up to that point, and sort of calmed down. And suddenly I realized I had a brilliant thought. You know, nobody else knows, just the president and me. And so I squared my shoulders and I walked out, and the agent outside, the United agent, said, have you finished your conversation with President Johnson? And I could truthfully say, yes, the president and I have finished our conversation. So he walked back to the lounge with me, rode out to the plane with me, whispered in the ear of the flight attendant, please upgrade Mr. Foley from economy to first class at the convenience of United Airlines. He has just had a very important conversation with the President of the United States. Those were the days when a wrong number could get you upgraded.
Now, I have something that just came into us as we wrap up this special tribute. This statement just came in from Tom Foley. You bet. That's okay. I want to first express my gratitude by thanking all of the speakers for their kind remarks. I also want to thank Randy Shaw, Kent Adams, and Rich Cowan for organizing tonight's event. And I plan to watch the tribute tonight through the link that was provided by Rich Cowan. I am overwhelmed that the Spokane community feels so strongly, and I wanted to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart for putting together such a nice evening. While I'm not able to be with you in person, please know that I am with you all in spirit. News of this event has prompted so many friends to write to me and even come visit me, for which I am truly grateful. It was my honor and my privilege to represent the 5th District for 30 years. I have such incredible and fond memories of the whole experience and of all the people I was privileged to work with, know, and represent in Congress. Heather and I treasure the friends that we made, the many people we met, and we're always humbled by those who brought us into their lives and into their hearts. It was my district honor to be able to provide assistance and help so many along the way. As a representative for the 5th District, I wanted more than anything to help the economy of Eastern Washington, and I hope that some of the fingerprints I have left behind helped and contributed to the development and growth of Spokane and all of the counties that make up the district. I want to thank you all so much for coming and taking the time to remember me. Semper Fidelis, Tom. That wraps up our special tribute to this wonderful American known as Tom Foley. And I'd like to bring up the house lights right now because I would like all of you to participate in what's going to happen next. I would like you to say, thanks, Tom, as we send a photograph of him of all of you. I'll lead you in that. All right, can we get all the house lights up? There we go. Are we all set? Wonderful photographer here, all set to go. Wide-angle lens. In 3, 2, 1, say, thanks, Tom. 3, 2, 1.
Thanks, Tom.
All right. We'd like to thank Vista and Washington Trust, who underwrote all of this program. I want to thank our young piano player, Gabe Jensen, who's here, the wonderful Bing Crosby Theater, all the television and radio stations who all got together, worked together, and helped promote this event. Deborah Wild, Tom MacArthur, Nostalgia Magazine, and Peak Productions. And also, if you've not had a chance to record a personal message for Tom Foley and Heather, we have 2 video crews still in the lobby there. Please stop by. Thank you all very much for coming. Good night, everybody.
Well, a completely full lower level here at the Bing Crosby Theater. Lots of enthusiasm this evening and a great program. A lot of old memories gemmed up, if you will, gemmed up. A lot of heads shaking on some of the speakers. Tom MacArthur. This is Kent Adams. We've enjoyed bringing this message tonight, Tom.
You should take a bow yourself here, Kent. You and Rich have planned this for the last several months, and it was your vision together that made this happen. The sponsors, of course, paid the bills, but it took somebody with the idea, and cheers to you for
thank you.
Coming up with that idea. As was mentioned here tonight, it's not about whose side of the aisle you're on. It's, which side of the state you're on, and in this case, we're all in Eastern Washington.
Absolutely. For the radio broadcast this evening and on any repeats that may happen, we thank very much a couple of folks who stepped up to help underwrite the costs. And as you heard, with no commercial breaks during the last couple of hours, Avista, we thank you very much for helping underwrite the cost, as well as Maloney and O'Neill Insurance. Both of those two, we really appreciate. Thank them. Next time you see them, we appreciate very much. I'm Kent Adams with Tom MacArthur. Our engineer is Tom Reed and Andy Cook at times, here and there, and assistance has been Andy Mendoza. We appreciate your listening tonight, and Tom, we miss you. Thanks, Tom.
You have enjoyed a live broadcast from the Bing Crosby Theater in downtown Spokane. A living tribute to Tom Foley, the gentleman from Washington for 30 years. Thanks, Tom. Your master of ceremonies was Randy Shaw. Your radio hosts, Tom MacArthur and Kent Adams. Audio engineers, Tom Reed and Andy Cook. Our production manager, Andy Mendoza, and executive producers, Kent Adams and Rich Cowan. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Deborah Wild for Talk Radio West.